Good afternoon, everyone. Hello and welcome to all of you for this interesting session around AI. AI has been the buzzword for the last couple of years. Post ChatGPT, there's been a plethora of new use cases, new solutioning, new offerings, new products, new companies investing in that. While we all know about what AI can typically do, we are also getting greatly concerned about what all would be the impacts on us as users and each of us as leaders, young leaders, or senior leaders in the industry, we also have to own up some bit of it, and we need to be sure that we are contributing in the right way to ensure that the biases don't get seeped into the AI. And because post which it's going to be really difficult for us to roll back. I mean, because AI can take a body of its own and can function much more faster than a human. So because of which we all need to really ensure that we understand the basis of AI, why, what, how of the AI, and why, what, how of the ethics around the AI. Right. So let's get in our speaker today. My name is Santosh, and I have Karthik, who's one of the AI thought leaders. He's also our past chairman at Young Leaders Council at AIMA. He's been a proponent of AI. He's written books on that. He's been coaching people. He's been advising multiple companies around the AI theme and the strategy. Karthik, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Santosh. Always a pleasure to be on YLC platform.
Wonderful, right? So, Karthik, let's start with this. No, I want to keep it more organic in the conversation. Right? I do have a set of questions at my end, but also keep it very organic. I want to sort of double click on various of the insights that you may have, and I want to try and understand for myself as for my audience also to understand, what's AI at in a broader sense, and the different types of AI, ANI, AGI, right? So, if you can also brief us on that. And then we'll go deeper into the ethics and the principles behind those, how each of us could take a stance, how can we build activism around that, and how can we ensure that if we are part of a AI journey, how do we ensure that certain of the biases in the general world don't get percolated into the AI world, right? I hope this flow is fine with you.
Sure. Happy to make it more conversational rather than like a boring lecture. I don't want to put people off to sleep on a Friday evening.
And yeah,
So
is a too technical of a topic that can really can be can get boring, but also it's pretty interesting, right? So let me roll back and ask you the first question, right? What is AI for a common man?
so AI, simply put, is in layman terms an autonomous system which is capable of having its own intelligence and can do decision making. Now, both these words are also subject to a lot of discussion that what is really intelligence. There are books on defining intelligence and what's decision making. But easiest way to understand it is, let's say you have any system, right? And people who are here who studied systems in physics and mathematics, they would understand any agent or system which is capable of doing autonomous decision making. So what I mean by autonomous is typically most of the systems you see around yourself, like in workplaces, you have ERP, CRM. So people talk about automation, that we have automated this process. We have a lot of automation going on. Now, automation typically is a rule-based system in which you have defined like set of logics, and there is a clearly defined if then execute this sort of a command chain. So it's 100%, guaranteed output for a certain set of inputs. So 8th class maths, y equal to fx, right? So you have clearly defined y equal to fx. So for any x, you would have a clear y. But when we talk about AI systems, we are talking about not automated, but autonomous systems. Now, autonomous systems are not rule based, they are learning based. So while an automated system would be a deterministic system, an autonomous system is a stochastic or a probabilistic system, which means that for a given input X, there is no defined Y. There are set of possible Y for a certain X, and all of them have weights assigned to their probability of occurrence, and then you get a weighted mean of sorts for all the possible outputs. So case in point is, let's say if you go to a mall during COVID, you might recollect when you go to a mall, there would be a bounding box on your face at the entrance of the mall. And as you go closer to that camera, the number on that bounding box increases. So it's basically assigning the probability of you being a human being. So when you are away, for an AI model, you could be a cat or a dog or a horse. But only when you are closer, it assigns a higher weight to you being human because it measures the characteristics of you being similar to a human being. So, in a nutshell, AI systems are autonomous systems that are able to look at different possible outcomes for a given input and a context and give us the best suited mean of all those weights. And you see these examples of recommendation engines in Spotify, YouTube, or Alexa, but these are all manifestations of a system which is trying to mimic intelligence. And by intelligence, I mean it's able to define which is the best possible or best suited outcome from a set of possible outcomes for a given prompt or an input.
So to simply put across, I mean, this became a bit more technical, so I'm trying to simplify for everyone. I'll probably go with the first few sentences that you made, right, and talked about the difference essentially comes from the notion that it is not just a rule-based engine, which is to automate my given task, but here it is developing, it is improving its own intelligence bases the learning patterns that are available within those boundaries that are defined to it, and then it makes starts taking decisions on its own. So the filters are not human driven all the time, so the system can actually start creating its own filters and definitions basis which it will start taking decisions, if that's sort of a
Right.
simplified version, right? So yeah, then we speak about when we speak about AI, we speak about the narrow intelligence versus the general intelligence. Do you want to put in a word or two around what is the difference between the two and how each of these can be relevant to different industries?
Right. So most of the AI-based systems, which over the years have evolved, have been very, I mean, narrow is typically focused on a certain use case. So you've got most AI systems that are closed domain and very focused on a particular task. So what that means is, let's say if we talk about simple speech to text based system, right? It's only able to do speech and convert it into text and do natural language processing on it. So that's narrow, right? A task-based, specific domain focused. That AI system is useless if you want that system to, let's say, use computer vision to segregate waste into dry waste, wet waste. It cannot do it, right? It's not trained to do that. So historically, most of the AI systems have been narrow or task-based. But now, in the last 5 years or so, there has been an increased focus on creating systems that are more general in nature. So the ultimate goal of AI, if you sort of read, if you're curious about it, is to do two things. One is to understand human brain, like how human brain works, and to be able to mimic human intelligence and decision making. And mind you, human intelligence or decision making is not limited to numerical capabilities because that has been surpassed by computing systems long back. But intelligence by humans has got multiple facets like numerical abilities, cognitive abilities, emotional intelligence, and so on and so forth. And now, researchers around the world are trying to create what they call as AGI or artificial general intelligence, which can actually look at a certain problem statement and maybe do an ensemble of different AI models or different, subsets of AI solutions and come up with a intelligent answer. So, case in point could be you could have the system be like a AI factory supervisor, right? So don't sort of define anything for this and say, hey, this is a humanoid, which is a AI supervisor. Go onto the shop floor. So it will observe for a few hours that who's doing what, and then is able to detect this person is mapped to this station. This is what they're doing. This is the throughput. This is the operational effectiveness of the plant, and then over time figure out a role for itself. So you're not defining anything for it. It will figure out with time that, hey, I need to look at these parameters. I need to optimize this. This is my role. So it's general intelligence, just like a human being. When you say, go to the shop floor and take a knowledge understanding of who's doing what, very similar to that. So you don't need to explicitly train the AI system to do anything. It has general intelligence capabilities and is able to figure out what role it has to play and can execute as a combination of data science, computer vision, and natural language processing. And you don't need to explicitly tell it to do something. It can figure it out from the context.
Got it. Got it. Uh, so something that you mentioned is also interesting that like a human can go into a shop floor and learn, uh, and we also need to train the AI models, right? And that's a challenge a lot of early stage founders will face, that they don't have enough data sets available for them to really train. So we talk about LLMs, right? Uh, do you want to elaborate a bit more on what's the standard kind of requirement that for anyone to train the AI? Where do they get the data sets for these kind of training? Is it from the public data? Uh, is it from other entities that are selling this data? Do we have to be worried about this?
There's nothing to worry about it. So a lot of the data sets are available in public domain. So if you go to Hugging Face, Kaggle, or ImageNet, so data sets are comprised of multiple formats, right? So there are data sets for images, for image tagging. There are data sets available for voice. There are medical data sets available for anyone who wants to do study on diagnostic models. During COVID, a lot of data sets were exposed to open public to be able to figure out early detection of COVID using the X-ray scan of lungs. Educational data sets are available online in terms of learning outcomes, in terms of performance, past performance of students. So I think a lot of data sets are available in open context. But if you're looking at a certain business, right, you might get macro level data sets which are available, but then you as an organization might be using different set of machinery or different set of processes, and you of course need to then look for custom data set which you would have to partly create. Now there's a lot of focus these days on creating synthetic data, because in cases you're not having data sets available, you can also look at creating synthetic data which has its own compute cost to be able to create. So it's a combination of, I think, your use case, your processes, the compute you have at disposal, and a cost trade-off equation actually.
Cool. So, so these are public data that's available in public in general. So, companies can access that and then create or build their own models on top of it, which is applied to the thinking aspect of the AI system that we're talking about, right? Now let me just talk about a use case that I have seen in my banking journey. In my day job, as head of innovation, we work with a lot of AI models for ourselves. And one of the challenges that we keep talking about ourselves in terms of our domain is the data that we have, right, or any bank that has certain skewed biases that are there. For example, the amount of lending that we have done or the number of applications that we have processed are generally more for male than for female, right? So the bias is already there in the data that I have at my disposal. Now let's take the second paradigm to that is a certain set of society. I've talked about gender, but let me talk about a certain ethnicity, right? A certain ethnicity, because these have been the ones that have had access to banking earlier. So their data is what is more available. So my concern today, or our concern at the bank, is that we are worried that we might be setting these kind of biases to my system itself in terms of gender, age, type of business, ethnicity, race, religion. All of this is getting chugged along in the future artificial intelligence world. At least in the human world, what would happen is that you could have more activism, you could have certain guidelines and regulatory overseeing to remove these biases. But in the world where the system takes decisions for anything and everything, our control would be lower than what is in the human world, or much, much lower than in the human world. And today, if I don't ensure my data is having equality and equity, then I might end up having a system that is going to continue those biases and amplify those biases, right? I mean, just giving you an example of the banking world. Let me just step away and talk about the hiring world, right? Again, same, if you look at the gender biases that we have in the real world, unfortunately, that is also seen in the kind of resume data bank that we may have, right? If you look at India, the latest data that I saw was about 17% of Indian women are in the workforce, uh, compared to the 83% of the Indian men in the workforce, right? In the current pie chart, if I look at it, right? So if there is a AI hiring system that is out there, will it end up having those biases? Because the data set itself is already biased, and it would probably do that, continue to have those bias. Looking at men should always have the seniority or senior positions. Uh, these are ethical dilemmas that we are living in current days. I'm just looking at two different domains, right? Banking as well as hiring, which you can probably convey to other domains as well, right? It could be in the education side, it could be in the manufacturing. So, what are your thoughts around these ethical dilemmas, and how would an young leader address this, and how should someone be cognizant of this fact and ensure that there's some solutioning around this challenge that we're facing today?
So the way I look at it, Santosh, is that there are two large sources of um, issues around bias creeping into a AI system. One is through what we call as algorithmic bias, and the other is bias through data. And both of them sort of feed into each other. Let's say if in case of the examples you've given, like there is a defined possibility of biasness in data, because just the top of the funnel, that there is a potential gender bias detected in the model because of data being skewed. Then you have to tune your algorithm accordingly. So it's not that all of this sits in silos, right? If you are
Mm,
a innovator or if you're a tech company, and through your train data that this is a potential bias which is going to get creep into my data, and you can do that simple analysis to figure out how your train data is, whether through sampling techniques. I mean, not going again into statistical techniques in this conversation, but there are ways to figure out how your train data looks like if you want to get a sense of it. And in that, if you see broad level of patterns, emerging out of it, which you feel could be potentially inducing bias into the system, you could control bias through uh, tweaking your algorithm or fine tuning it. So I think that's where now most of the companies or innovators are looking at, that how can I manage this balance? And sometimes it may be possible that you're creating a fundamental model and you're not using any open source model and tuning it. In that case, your algorithmic bias could be higher. And then you have to manage the data side of it. So it's like managing a fine balance on, or walking on a tightrope, that you have to constantly see, how my data is responding, and then also parallelly see how my model is responding to this data. And I think that's where the key challenge is going to be. And then the last but not least technique is that you then pass test data to it, and then do the entire recursive cycle again and again. That I managed a particular balance of train data in my algorithm, and then this is the output. And then there's a whole bunch of evaluation metrics. You look at z-score, accuracy, precision, and then reiterate on the model to make sure that have you sort of managed the bias in this. Then there is a human reinforcement feedback loop mechanism which you can use, wherein then you can do an A/B testing with a human sort of evaluator and then check. So I think those are the techniques which I have seen people doing to manage this. But even if you look at humans, right, bias exists everywhere, right? You mentioned about all these examples, banks, right? If a certain type of a person comes to ask for loan, human being is destined to sort of, or trained conditionally to figure out or take a biased call that, okay, should I give a loan or not? Similarly, in hiring, when we take interviews, you get a certain bias subconsciously, right? I mean, we may or may not want to admit it. Like, for example, I'm from a certain college, right, IIT. And if there is an IIT Roorkee junior sitting across the table, I may or may not want to admit, but somehow I'll feel okay, chalo mera junior hai, that creeps in, right? So you cannot say that human beings are completely devoid of bias. That amplification happens in humans as well, because you will see companies the whole company where everybody is from McKinsey, whole company where everybody is from a certain bank, right? This happens all the time, you know. So as we speak, this happens on a human feedback loop as well. But in AI, I think there is an opportunity to actually address that. Because if you are able to maintain that balance over time, you would have an extremely inclusive and distributed workforce, which is never possible with a human recruiter or a human being doing screening. So I think uh, after a few years of creating this balance, AI systems will be more adapt at making sure that there is more inclusivity at workplace. So I think that's a positive thing to look forward to.
Fair enough. So, a follow-on question there, right? I completely agree with you, right? Because the data set that is created today is because of the biases that the humans have, and also the historical color that we unfortunately are all muddled into. A follow-on question there is now, at least with the humans, right? There's certain activism with wokeness, or there's certain call out that can be done, right, in the social media. I can call out for these kind of biases that are being, let's say, I'm from IIM Bangalore, right? So there's obviously a soft corner that for my fellow IIM guys who might reach out to me, but then I can be called out for that, right? So because of that, at least there's certain fear that I may have, not to get called out, not to get cornered around these kind of things, and also to have my own moral compass, right? I might double check my own decisions. But would an AI do that? How does one call out the AI wrongdoings?
So there are multiple ways, right? So you would have seen a big movement happening in the US as we speak around explainability of AI. So one of the big ways in which you can develop trust in AI systems is to make them more explainable. So what explainable means in layman terms is, in a way, give out the algorithm.
Mm.
So if you would see an AI system, I mean, in enterprises, it's relatively easier to do because if, let's say, that's not your core idea. For example, my recruitment system, if I develop it on AI for my internal company, I can put the algorithm and the system architecture out for critique, and people can crowdsource ideas and data set into it. And in that way, it's like basically, in layman terms, showing your question paper that this is what I asked typically, this is my weighting score, this is my evaluation metrics, and if anybody has any comments, you can critique on it. So that way you make the evaluation process for general public open. Now the hard part in this is that as AI systems become more and more complex and you go towards AGI, it's like a Rubik's cube. You might develop a system today, but then AI with time is going to fine tune it further. So it will be AI which is creating further AI in layman terms. And then that becomes very difficult to assign accountability to, because today in many of the court proceedings, if you ever have time and if you're curious, in US a lot of action is happening, and if you see some of these proceedings, the deponent will always say, we're not able to properly outline how our algorithm works because our algorithm is not static, it's dynamic, and it's dynamically managed via AI. So I don't really define as a decision tree that this is the sequence of events in which a particular task is executed in my algorithm. It's dynamic and it's constantly changing and it's adaptive. So how do I define? What do I explain? I can only explain my AI as a point function of time now, but tomorrow if you call me again for this hearing, my answer will change. So in that way, people are able to dodge these conversations. So accountability becomes extremely tricky when it comes to explainability of AI. So I think, but that's the only way in which you are able to demonstrate trust, that, in any transaction in our personal lives also. I think the more you share, the more you communicate, the more you openly talk about how a certain decision is being made, I mean, it just creates trust in the system, right? So it's the same with AI. If you're able to call out, and the second, of course, is if there is any outlier, how do you address it? So grievance mechanism around AI decisions. So let's say if a wrong hiring is done, if there is a potential bias detected, how quickly can you adapt your model to address that outlier? Or can you really demonstrate that this was an outlier and not a potential pattern? So I think those are the ways in which you would be able to, you know, show some bit of trust into the AI system. And with any large systems in place, it's with the percentage of right decisions versus odd. So there'll never be a use case where 100% of the output or 100% of cases would be error free or would not have any bias or nobody have any issue with it. But I think the Pareto rule applies. If 80-90% of decisions seem to be fair, the odds are that that system will, proliferate.
Karthik, I'll probably ask an entertaining question. Now, you talked about the court proceedings or the legal side of it, and then accountability gets really tricky. So, uh, who do you put behind bars, the AI system or the human who built it? If something were to go wrong.
Yeah, that's why you cannot fix the accountability because exactly this point is being discussed as I was referring to. So human being would say that I have not explicitly built the system. So it's either AI assisted or AI which is further adapted. And I think that's the same discussion which you if you want to make it more entertaining, it's like a driverless car. If it kills somebody, then who is accountable? You can't penalize the passenger. You can't penalize the OEM. Do you penalize the
The
developer in
software
that
engineer.
software company? So these are questions which are still sort of, from a legal perspective, not categorically answered very well. Um, I mean, the issue of handling false positives and false negative, I think it's still a bit dodgy as of now. And I think as regulations take shape, like EU has taken a step forward, US is now following the lead. So I think with any regulation, the idea is to make it very adaptive because even these regulations, if you read through, they are more concerned with assigning the risk and impact metrics to any situation which arises, right? And the regulators will always go on the side of um, creating a deterrent by high penalty incidences. Now that's fine, but let's say if due to AI system somebody loses their life, now beyond the point that penalty doesn't help, right? And how do you ensure that those cases are not repeated? So I think to be able to define, as I was saying in the previous question, that whether a particular incidence is a edge case, like a error handling outlier, or there is a possibility of an occurrence of this case again. I think that's where the real game changing AI would be if you can able to preempt that whether this is really an outlier or not. Because even in Six Sigma systems, there will be two errors and whatever 3.4 billion outputs, right? So there's always going to be error, but what's the impact of that error and whether it's really a one-off case or there is a potential of higher incidence of such cases. That's where the differentiation would occur.
Yeah, I think the regulators, have sort of in US have taken a lead. In Europe, I think is also setting a lot of precedents in some of these activities, right? So US, I think California has banned GM right now after the debacle of the self-driven car ended up impacting an individual. Uh, Now, Karthik, let's talk about how young leaders uh, can be wary of these things. Like how does one, if I'm not a technical expert, how do I, because I run a business or I'm part of a large business unit, how do I ensure that I'm sufficiently equipped with this knowledge, right? Do you suggest some basic foundational courses for us to equip ourselves around these topics? Because these topics are have a certain tangential way to look at going too technical. So, but for me, if I have to talk about ethics, if I have to talk about or challenge my developers or challenge my partner tech company, I need to at least be able to speak the language. How does one start gathering this kind of knowledge for oneself?
See, it's like with AI is nothing special. I mean, with any new technology, I think as entrepreneurs or as business leaders, one should definitely understand the language and they should understand the basics of it. Because I remember 20 years back when I started working, simple IT vendors used to fool customers by managing scope creep, putting in change request, and the promoters would never able to figure out. But with time, a lot of that opacity has gone down, and people sort of know how much time effort it takes to build a website or a CMS system or a e-commerce website. So I think that level of maturity comes with time. Similarly, I think in AI systems, for example, in my conversations with a lot of business leaders, I think 1 year or 2 year back, they were absolutely clueless. I mean, somebody could build a wrapper on top of an API or a plugin, and they would know, they would take it for a real AI. But now I can see those conversations where business leaders at least know that, okay, show me, are you using an API, or have you built your own fundamental model, or are you just building something on top of OpenAI? So I think that level of learning curve will take its own time because AI could be slightly tricky. I mean, if you want to really get hands-on, there are plethora of free resources available on YouTube, on edX, Coursera, all these platforms, right? So there's no dearth of content. But as business leader, how much time you're able to commit to actually learn it, and do you really need to get into so much of depth, or do you really need to know at a high level whether something? I mean, as simple as, are you able to figure out whether something is really AI or just automation? That's a level one understanding, right? And then level two would be whether that AI is sort of AI built by proprietary AI built by a company, or is it using some open source model and just fine tuning it? So I think those basic level of understanding, which can help you in doing decision making or making sure that you're able to drive a roadmap with your CTO or your tech team. I think that's sufficient at this point in time, unless you want to yourself become a hands-on developer or a product architect. Then there is a different pathway to sort of learn AI. But I think as business leaders, these basic understanding pathways around AI should be sufficient. And I think the whole benefit of AI is that you should not be wanting to learn a lot of tech, right? I remember when I was in IIT, a lot of folks from IIM used to come to us and say, "Hey, I want a tech co-founder. I have a great, amazing idea, which I've incubated in B school, but I don't know how to develop it." So, but now I see 20 years now, you don't need that, right? If you have a great idea, it's very easy now to, get started. You have tools available which can create website. You have AI tools which can make a beautiful pitch deck. You can create an MVP in Figma. So today, if you see, and I feel that's really the power of these technologies, that today a person who has a great idea, they need a bloody good excuse to say, I'm not able to get it off the ground because I'm not technical, I'm a business person. I mean, it's very easy now. It's the innovation is truly democratized, and I think it's going to become more and more easier for anyone who has a great idea to bring it to life using AI. So in some sense, you don't need to know a lot of behind the scenes AI. You need to know how to work with it to actually solve your problem. I think that's where the focus would evolve into.
Brilliant. So, the interesting journey that we've seen with our own hiring and the various other hiring is today, right? We talk about more of hiring prompt engineers than software engineers, right? And there's the whole branch that is getting developed in the academia as well. So when we talk about
And
academia,
and prompt, since you mentioned, sorry to interrupt. Now the whole focus is towards auto prompt. So thinking of what to prompt is also
also
gonna get
getting
automated. So it's like thought-based prompting. So you just have a thought, and then it can create the right prompt for you. And so you don't even need to do prompt engineering. It's just a few releases away, and you can get auto prompting done also.
not a great day to talk about Neuralink today, right? With the debacle around that. So I'll step aside
Yeah,
from that in the thoughts. So
yeah.
let me take a couple of questions, very interesting ones that are out there. Uh, one of the questions is, what are the potential societal implications of widespread automation driven by AI and robotics? Like, I think it's more about how the society could get impacted in both job opportunities as well as in general for our life.
I think my personal view is, and I get this question asked a lot around, jobs, employability, And then the second part is on a personal level, how it's going to impact. I think on a societal level, from a jobs perspective, I have a strong view that people who are doing not so skilled jobs, they're going to have a hard time. And when I say not so skilled jobs, even software devs, people doing testing, people doing general management, people doing MIS reporting, I mean accounting, talent acquisition, marketing, communication. I think a lot of these professions, it's going to become extremely hard for you to justify your value proposition as AI becomes better. So I think unless people upskill themselves significantly, uh, the fear around job loss is real. And I think
Mm.
rather than just hushing it away and saying new jobs will be created, I mean, it's fine to be optimistic, but I think people really need to get a reality check and get cracking on upskilling themselves, because if you are in a job role, you need to really apply and think logically that if AI is going to be, let's say, 2x better than what it is right now, can it do a better job? Like today, if let's say I'm doing accounts payable in a company, I mean, I need to think that if a good level of robotic process automation kicks in and you got a good AI tool which sort of does entire processing to bank posting to GL posting. I mean, what value am I going to really add as accounts payable person? I think if the answer to that question you're not very clear, then odds are that you will lose that particular job function with time. I'm seeing a big change in publishing industry, in content industry. I mean, all content players are, or social media company, digital agencies. I've worked with so many of them. They're all now sort of shedding their teams because, I mean, it's just cheaper, better, faster, more efficient, right? So I think that's on a society level that fear is real, and we need to really think about at an individual level. I mean, what governments will do, they will do in due course of time. But I think as individuals, all of us who are here today, my sincere recommendation is to take a hard stop and think in your particular career where you see AI impacting, and do you really in next 2 3 years anticipate that with a better version of AI, would you still be relevant? And if not, make some changes to be relevant. Otherwise, you'll be just being sort of catching up with technology, and suddenly you're like, and the worst I think is tech guy Santosh. I mean, the other day one of my tech guy was telling me, so sir, basically we are developing stuff to
Kill
make
ourselves.
ourselves redundant. So that sounds really stupid, sir. Like, why would I build a good system to make myself jobless? But on a serious note, I mean, those are the things which are happening, right? So you got to be aware of it. On a personal level, I think it's going to be extremely interesting. Like one of the things I'm working on right now is making conversational AI enabled smart sort of toys for young children, and it's a very interesting industry. But I can't help but think also parallelly that how it would be for, let's say, a child who has no sibling to have, let's say, a AI enabled sibling with whom they can talk, they can share. Now one end of spectrum is that, hey, it's extremely sad, they should be talking to a human being. But on the other end of the spectrum, it's like, let's say you don't have a human being or a companion and you develop mental health problems due to loneliness. Is it better to have an AI as a companion? And how would it impact your other human relationships? I mean, in those sense, I mean, I know so many people who are actually using Alexa and similar applications as real companions. Like a lot of people use it for transactional, but I've come across a lot of people who really use it for proper conversations. In Japan, when people are talking about marrying humanoids, living with them, and as co-workers in workspaces. So I think on a personal level, as a society, I think it's going to be extremely interesting to see how human-human interactions get impacted with human AI interactions. And the funniest would be AI interaction. So, now people are doing human and AI interviews. But let's say tomorrow, my digital twin could be doing a session with your digital twin. Now, how does that look like? Those kind of interactions are extremely, to me personally, they are very fascinating, and to some people they are very scary also. So I think
Absolutely.
we'll see how future unfolds.
Absolutely, and it is scary, but I think it's important to accept what it is and start looking at what solutions can I apply to myself and how do I upskill myself. I think upskilling is the only solution that all of us are looking at. So the change being constant is all the more important in today's world, right? Where we're talking about AI and quantum. Maybe on quantum, I was just talking to a couple of experts in our organization as well outside. We're looking at probably about a 5 6 year horizon when quantum would become mainstream. Right, that's what I hear from these hands-on experts. And uh, what's scary and interesting at the same level is when you marry quantum with the AI capabilities. The AI is the software side of it, and the hardware capabilities of quantum. It's a powder keg waiting to be detonated, right? So when that happens, I think our uh, humanity probably will progress much faster. And if you want to be part of that progress, so all of us have to have that upskilling as part of it. But how feasible is it for anyone to upskill? I mean, it's easy to say that go to a Coursera free course and learn something about that. But is it even possible for us to talk about upskilling the whole large workforce that we have today, right, in various industries? What are your views, Karthik, on that?
I think it's possible because if you see, and I think one should always learn from history and look at past trends, right? I remember my dad, as a personal example, used to work in a bank, State Bank of India, all his life, right? Commerce graduate, no understanding of IT computers, right? And when core banking system came in late 90s, it was like a big hawa, right? That, oh, computers are coming.
Mhm.
All back then, I remember even financial statements, balance sheet, everything used to be done manually. Like the
Yeah.
balance sheet of SBI used to be like thousands of pages long, but all manually created in Mumbai. And my dad was like, "We'll all be jobless. Like, I can never learn computer." But fast forward, I think 2004, 2005, he was working and preparing everything on computers, right? So I've seen a living example, somebody in mid 40s, late 40s, around that time, commerce person, no idea of bits, bytes, computers, learned to work with computers. And some of his colleagues who could not, they left their job or they were made redundant. So I think I mean, as a human being, if you ask me that, is it possible to train somebody when it comes to, survival needs? People learn all sort of things at any age or any stage of life, irrespective of their background. But if you're looking sort of an incremental skilling roadmap, I think it's going to be an extremely difficult task for a lot of people because people are so used to a lot of jobs I know or like people are just used to showing up at work and just doing the same thing they are doing. I think those kind of people would have a hard time because it's going to be in the uncomfortable zone. But I think we have seen this with computers in last 10 to 15 years that today, if you ask anybody or I mean anybody, literally anyone, even I know people who are grandparents, they can use their phone, they can make WhatsApp calls, they can. Who would have thought? I mean, you and I have still sort of grown up with little bit of computers. Our children are growing up in a digital native age. But think of our parents and grandparents. They never even imagined something like this, but they are still able to work with this technology. So I have high hopes that, if I just extrapolate that, our generation can also, we may not have learned AI or we may not have learned to work with AI, but I don't think it's an extremely hard task. As human beings, we're very resilient. If the why is clear, then the how happens. So if I know I'm going to lose my job, if I don't learn AI, I have kids to feed and a home to sort of support. I learn AI, but it's not going to be out of convenience for sure.
Absolutely. So which actually makes sense when you talked about instead of hushing away the fears, let's face it off now so that we know in real there is a threat for employability. So probably it's better to take a step today than probably 5 years down the line, right? So start upskilling yourself. So, any foundational courses? You mentioned YouTube, but do you recommend any other platforms as well for someone to go and start upskilling? Someone has mentioned there's a question about what beside R should I learn, right? I mean, what other coding language should be learned, or what other platforms should be explored?
See, so like I would not suggest any commercial platform. I mean, I also run a skilling business, but I don't want to suggest anybody's commercial interest here. So open source, lot of, I mean, you go to huggingface.com, right? I mean, the umpty number of models available. You search on YouTube, I want to learn AI, free content available on YouTube. So I think you can start with YouTube and Hugging Face for models. In terms of language, since you asked, Python is a primer language to start with, and you can learn that. All these large companies like Google, Amazon, Azure, they have skills programs. So you go to Google AI or Amazon AWS SageMaker AI, you will see plethora of courses, hands-on experiments in AI, which they make available for free. I think that's a good place to start with. Um, and I was seeing somewhere somebody had written that if you are somebody with a very strong tech background, what do you do? I think what you can do in that case is start working with some of the frameworks. Like if you pick your poison, let's say you say I want to focus on large language models in NLP. That's where I want to build my capability. So look at Anthropic, OpenAI, or Llama 3, which is launched. Look at some new SLMs which Microsoft is launching, like Pi 3. Play out, create your own custom model on top of some of the open source models, fine tune it. So I think you can get a bit more hands on if you are a practitioner yourself. Yeah, I think that's where you can get started. And lastly, I think on a foundation level, a lot of books are also available. You go on Amazon, you can see a lot of books on AI which are available, and you can just get started. But it's a hard subject. One of the things I've seen in skilling is that um, if you're not really passionate about sort of learning it, then it becomes very hard as well because AI, if you want to get into a little bit of more technical understanding, it requires a lot of effort in terms of having the foundation of statistics, foundation of basic libraries in Python. But if you want to take it from a business lens, then I think some of the content available on YouTube and courses which are available through these large companies like Google, Amazon, I think they should be enough for you just to get a hang of things. And then last but not the least, I think if you can look at a particular use case, let's say if you are a HR person, and I'll take a real example. And that's how I always say that you shouldn't care about what's happening globally in AI. You should see what's happening for your function. So if I say I'm a recruiter, for lack of a better like I call candidates, I screen them, I have a job description template. Based on that, I hire candidates. Right? Look at map your entire process flow and see where AI is going to exactly hit you. So if I'm a recruiter, today I get JD. JD can be automated using ChatGPT. I do JD matching with CV from Naukri or whatever portal. That could be done using natural language processing, doing keyword matching. I make calls. Calls can be done through different voice cloning softwares where you can clone your voice and they can call on your behalf. I do interviews. Interviews could be done using, Synthesia and create digital avatars and do video interviews. I do assessment. Assessment can be done through, let's say, a lot of open source tools available where you can run video analytics on your gestures, tone of voice, and so on. So I issue offer letters. Offer letters can be issued in an automated manner. I block calendars of candidates that can be done using Calendly, Firefly, Karta. I do onboarding. Onboarding can be done through AI. So then you see as a recruiter, what will I do? So today, all these processes, here is how AI is getting developed. So you reimagine your role and see, hey, as a recruiter, 3 years down the line, what will I really do? Will I be training AI system or a combination of all these AI systems? Will I be a functional tester? What will be my real role? Or I'm a human reinforcement feedback loop supervisor or a governance person. I think you need to really think like that on a more operational level and then say, okay, if I'm going to be this, then let me look at tools for recruitment, which help in better optimization of keyword matching, or I should learn better about interview assessments of video interviews, or I should focus on managing the logistics of the whole interview process, improving the user experience. So you need to pick and choose at that micro level. That's what I'm saying.
And that's a bit scary, I would say. I advise a startup called Hire GPT. They're exactly doing what you mentioned. So they were
Hmm.
wrapped around all of them, and their pitch to the clients is that your junior recruiting staff, your talent acquisition staff costs you about 25K, 30K a month. I'm going to give you this for 25K a year, right? This package that you can do like hundreds of interviews, unlimited calendar blocking, unlimited video conversation recording, and since this is what is getting provided to the senior recruiter. So he or she doesn't have to even look at the ATS. Everything would probably get automated. So that is scary. Someone mentioned, there's a counter question that Google is laying off larger Python teams, right? I mean that there's going to be a tremendous amount of competition, right? Or is it even worth starting now to learn and compete with people who've been ahead of the curve?
I mean, those kind of things, companies rationalize their workforce all the time. And companies like Google, I mean, they sort of also create their own frameworks, right? They've created language, like Golang was created by Google, whatnot. So I think don't read too much into what some of these large companies are doing, because they're always sort of creating their own frameworks for dev. But I think, anyways, if you want to be a hands-on developer, then there's a different pathway for you. But if you want to be a business or a management person or a functional expert who wants to learn how to work with AI, I mean, that's where I think the focus has to be. If you want to be an AI dev, then that's a whole lot of different conversation, because every day, and it's again a dynamic conversation, because every day, new frameworks are coming in for AI dev as well, and a lot of new libraries are being built. So, how to be an AI developer, I think it's a very interesting conversation. And then,
Right.
do you really need to be an AI developer? Because if pure Copilot kicks in, you just need to be a functional person, and the AI assistant would do the dev for you. So why do you really need to learn dev skills? So
Awesome, sir. All right, so let's switch gears and we talk about, I'm an eternal optimist myself. So let's talk about what are the positive stuffs out there for one to build, right? Let's look at it from the entrepreneurial lens. You spoke about the hiring side of it, right? The whole first 5 steps of the hiring process can be automated. Now let's look at some other industries as well, right? So let's talk about entertainment industry, right? And media entertainment industry, which can be on the article writing side to book writing to content creation on the video side. What are the opportunities for someone to tap into and build things there ethically build things there?
see, in media entertainment, there are a lot of use cases. I mean, I think one of the biggest pain points in media entertainment industry, apart from content, is also editing. So I was speaking to one of the folks who sort of produces Shark Tank, and he gave me a use case which I couldn't solve, honestly. I can say it on record. He said that for every episode of Shark Tank, just for 25-30 minutes, they record 3 to 4 hours of content, right? And then there is a big pressure on editing team to edit it to, you got to capture the right moments, you got to capture the right camera, because in the 3-4 hours of content, you got multiple cameras, so n number of combinations, right?
Mm.
For each frame. Now he said, can you build me an AI where I can just interact with the system and say, hey, create a scene in which, let's say, Karthik was pitching and Anupam Mittal was smiling, and Piyush Bansal was looking at him. So based on those conversations, can you create scenes for me and then weave it together and edit and create the whole show? So I said I can then remove the whole editing team, and the AI system could do the recording and then just create the show real time. So like, wow, I spent some time on it, but it was, I mean, I'm still sort of thinking about it. But those are like real time problems. Like if anybody here can solve this problem, I can connect you to the producer. pitch it to him, and you can sort of take that work as an opportunity. So I think entertainment and media is super interesting because the amount of editing effort, the amount of rendering which goes on, I think using AI, and even in terms of creating true level digital avatars of performers or actors, and sort of just create the whole production without anybody physically doing anything and have that same level of effect, I think is the holy grail in media entertainment industry.
The Hollywood has been protesting, the writers guild has been protesting to remove or ensure that AI doesn't write the stories, right? But I think at some point in time it will catch up and it will take over that as well. Right. Let's talk about education, right? I mean, very interesting segment. Uh, what disruptions do you see there? Let's do some crystal ball vision.
So education, I mean, it's sort of very close to my heart and my area of work. But quickly, and it can be a whole discussion on its own. But I think in education, broadly, three areas I see opportunity. One is, I mean, we've been talking about personalization in education for last 15, 20 years, but it's not fully implemented. But I think with AI, it's possible to really do true personalization. So that's one opportunity. Second, I think is from the teaching part of it. Teachers typically don't get real-time feedback. They don't engage students enough because there is a one is to 40 or 1:50 mapping in a classroom. I think that level of empowering teachers to create content, deliver it in an engaging way is possible through AI. And lastly, I think a lot of administrative work around AI can be handled in a much better manner, and you can actually have teaching assistants, AI assistants acting as teachers who could do 24/7 support and sort of help students with their homework, assignments, and help them do adaptive learning at their own pace, at a speed they want. So I think those are the large good opportunities in AI in education, I feel.
Awesome. I think this it's really a vast subject. I think we just scratched the surface today. We started with the fundamentals of the AI and some basic building blocks of that, and then we really traverse through various industries and how ethics can be uh, really the holy grail, I would say, for the regulators. I mean, there have been plenty of questions around how would the government regulate AI. I think that's still far out in the woods, I would say, where we're all trying to figure out and dynamically find out. Each government is learning from each other step and seeing how the industry reacts, how the industry is going on its own. And it's easier said than done. There's no certain precedents or rule book to look at and say that let's deploy this rule book for this use case. But I think it's an evolving subject on its own. Any parting words for young leaders on upskilling themselves or how to interact with the AI?
Absolutely. I think I'm happy to sort of carry forward this conversation, Santosh. I know it's a vast topic. We're out of time now, but happy to sort of keep continuing this conversation. And if people have any questions, they can write. I think Rhythm has messaged her email ID and she can pass on the questions. So please feel free to give your comments and questions to Rhythm. And through that, I'll look at them and I'll reply back over the weekend. So I'm happy to support in any way possible.
Thank you so much, Karthik, for taking the time out on a busy afternoon and really walking us through the whole nitty-gritties and some of the very interesting aspects around the AI, the ethics, the governance, and the fear is real. Right? And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway for me is let's face it, it's okay. It's okay to be fearful, but probably that brings in the fight or flight in the humans, right? And probably that is the best kind of response that the time needs today from us, right? So thank you so much for taking time out and walking us through your insights around this, and it's a pleasure hosting you as always. Right? Look forward to another conversation pretty soon on this. Right?
Thank you.
And
Thanks, Santosh. Thanks, Rhythm. Thanks, everyone, for joining in. And I'm happy to help you taking this conversation forward in any way. Have a great
thank you,
evening.
everyone. We are right on time. It's 5:29 in India, so I thank you all for joining and listening to us patiently. And I hope there are more questions that will come our way. And please do join YLC if you're not part of it. As part of the executive board, it's my duty to keep reminding people to join and renew your subscription. So please do that. That's how it makes us possible to continue the operations and continue engaging with our audience. So look forward to some more interesting sessions in the coming days, and probably we'll host more AI content in the coming days. Thank you, everyone. Take care.